stay within our hearts today and ever. It's always with a lot of happiness that we get together in order to continue studying the inner search of all the courage and strength for us to keep going our day to day lives. Today, we have a very special day. Today, we'll have our dear friend, not here physically present, but close to our hearts within this big screen. We'll invite our dear Dr. Alberto Almeida. Good morning, Dr. Almeida.
Alegria de podermos estar compartilhando com você
It's with great happiness that we are
à
here
distância
sharing with you,
e de
given the
nós
distance,
podermos no presencial
so we can really, instead of being there
estar
physically
online
present,
e estar
we're here
nesse
online
grupo que
to be close to
realmente com
this
ternura
spiritist group that has really
faz
welcomed
parte.
me
Estamos
with a lot of
juntos.
candor and tender. We're together. So it was supposed to be here physically or face to face. We've had that in the agenda, but given this situation, we were not able to do that. Of course, for the reasons that only God knows, we've had to adapt to this new reality. And thanks to this great technology that we have, it is possible for us, even though we're far away, physically speaking, we're very closely aligned in spirit in order to able to see each other. It's a great blessing. Imagine if this had happened 70 or 80 years ago. Today, we're much closer thanks to technology overall. So, we thank Dr. Amita for having accepted our invitation. We thank all of you guys that are following us either online or here physically present. Our big thank you for your participation. And would like to speak, say a few words about Dr. Amita's work, because if we were really to talk about his overall biography, that's so exceptional, you take us a couple of hours because he's very, very special in all the works that he does. Dr. Amita, for those of you who don't know him yet, he's a clinical physician, homeopathic physician. He's also part of the Spiritist Medical Association, and he's also one of the directors from the Garden of the Oliveiras, a non-profit organization in Brazil. So we can talk a little bit about this institution as well. It's very, very quick, but this is the suggestion for us to really get to know more about Alberto and his accomplishments that really helps and repairs a lot of social injustices that we see in our daily lives. And it's in a state of north state in a north state of Brazil called Pará. It has over 50 years and has, of course, adapted through time. And this non-profit organization really welcomes whole families in order to give not only food or physical needs, but also medical, psychological, school, culture, arts, everything that a human being needs. Every child has the right, and we know that in the world that we live in today, there's a lot of inequities, and thanks to these institutions, they really reduce the suffering and the inequality in the world. But of course, we're talking about his works, that especially in Brazil, given the need, the dire needs that we have there. So this is an institution that it's worthwhile us knowing more about it, getting to know more about its accomplishments, and if possible, help for folks that are looking to help to collaborate financially. please do so. You can, really foster a child helping, as my mom used to say, a lot with God, a little with God is a lot. So if all of us have this solidarity sentiment through or thanks to this pandemic that's calling our attention, of course, we'll make the world a better place, a world more just, more fair. So here's our invitation. If you'd like, if you can, get to know more about this work, his activities. Could be online, could be with us at the Spiritist Center. Our little will go a long way. This is the not really asking for them, but for this initiative. And of course, we do that with other institutions, as you know. All of us have something to give. So, Dr. Almeida is going to talk to us about how to keep a relationship healthy. So, we get to learn a lot. It's a small talk, and then there's going to be a Q&A at the end. If you have Q&A, you're welcome to submit them. Or if you're here with us physically present, you can just give one of our volunteers, and we'll make sure that your question gets asked. So our time is so short, but before we ask to invite Dr. Almeida, would like to say a few prayers to be thankful for this moment that we're together here. Let us silence our minds, our thoughts, so that we can really take out of this environment the very best. Let us seek Jesus in order to thank Him once again for all the opportunity. We thank you, our dear Lord, for the opportunity to be here, present in your name. Please welcome our friend Dr. Almeida, who will talk to us. He's talked to us about relationships in the light of Spiritism. Dear friend Jesus, we thank you. And we also ask you, bless our dear friend with your love and really embrace all of us. We thank you so much. Stay with us now and ever. So be it. Let us welcome our friend with a lot of love, a lot of care, Dr. Almeida.
Queridos amigos, a minha extrema alegria
Dear friends, my extreme happiness
reflexões
of being able to share some reflections
a
that
multiplicar
may help us
possibilidades
in order to multiply
novas
possibilities, new possibilities in the field of relationships.
criatura
One of the most challenging ones that we can really have on earth.
se trata de relação muito íntima.
That being said, it's a very intimate relationship of marriage, of living together.
Perguntou aos
Allan Kardec asked the immortal spirits
sociedade
what will be for society
a abolição dos
the
relacionamentos
abolishment
do casamento.
of
Os
marriages.
espíritos
And the
responderam
spirits
seria
answered very eloquently, will be a going back to the life of animals.
uma nota explicativa
And the Spiritist codifier
resposta dos
adopted an answer with the more comments, even saying that
marca processo
marriage really establishes a evolutionary process within society. That up to some animals, mammals, give us some evidence of this connection that really establishes in a process of fidelity within two. The Emmanuel, the Spirit, proposes that humanity advances its relationships from polygamy to monogamy, plural relationships to singular relationships. Of course, marriage is a process of reciprocal assistance where two spirits connect themselves in a relationship that it's intrinsic, that's profound, that's intimate, that's reciprocal, as I said, that really establishes the growth of and also opens up the doors in order for children or kids, sons and daughters that really constitute a family. So it's thanks to this union that the family structures itself in its developments that are kids, children, that is the product of marriage. When Allan Kardec analyzes at the light of Spiritism what will be the basics of marriage, what will be the baseline of marriage, they say two things, two natural laws that really dictate the cosmic life. The first, it's material that suggests there's a reciprocal attraction for a vinculation, for a connection, sexual connection, sexual union. It's the first point that characterizes this association between two people in a relationship. The second one, would say Allan Kardec, is love. Love is the natural law, moral, subjective. The one is force. The first one's material, the second one moral, that really connect two people in a relationship, in this association, and also assistance, mutual assistance, rather. From country to country, marriage starts from a religious or a civil, or sometimes only religious, or sometimes only civil, demonstrating, therefore, that beyond the human legislation, beyond the culture that really every country has, what's present in a marriage or in a marital relationship really represents the natural laws. It's sexual union and love. That those two are the basis that suggest the relationship is established like husband and wife, or husband, wife, and wife. So of course we can establish the relationship in two with characteristics that drive us towards evolution. Of course, marriage is a living being that really emerges like a plant, for example, and then depends on how we treat, and thanks to fertilizers, thanks to the food that we give to that plant, it develops, it goes. And the product also through our children, and also continuous unions through all time. What the Spirit Emmanuel will say, you are married, you get married day after day. So marriage is a dynamic thing, it's living, that evolves, either evolves or it phases or tapers off and ends. If the marriage is not well taken care of, it really suffers some damages in its interactions, gets sick, like those that go to an infirmary or a hospital. If we don't give the proper treatment, that goes to the intensive care. And if we don't give the proper treatment there, right, it ends up dying. That's a metaphor that we can say that every relationship, it calls itself or calls for itself care, attention, responsibilities, and it also not an object of a series of ingredients that keep vitalizing the relationship. It suffers. So it codes, it gets to a prognosis of differences, conflict, and of course death, as we mentioned. That's how the Spirit Emmanuel talks to us about this sequence. Of course, the marriage has changes and developments, and of course, conflict can happen. If we don't take care of it, that indifference ended up taking to its death. Right? So, person has to maintain the relationship to have this comprehension that the dynamics, the marriage or marital dynamics involves a specific eye, care, a continuous, a love. That's why the similarities with the plant that doesn't really get sun in a continuous manner, if it doesn't absorb water, oxygen, if it doesn't have some interventions
fertilizantes,
in like fertilizers.
consegue
And of course, if
a retirada
it's
de
not able
pragas que
to
possam
take
ameaçar
care of the
o rendimento do
weeds that
vegetal,
may really
o
take
casamento
away,
sofre
as an
uma
example of the marriage,
portanto, uma
it's gonna suffer.
depreciação e
It
um
really
desgaste
deprecates in a
vai
way that
fazendo
it
uma
goes
decomposição
defacing itself, tempering off, imploding, and of course experiences
para
death
quem se
or
associou
the
com outro para fazer uma
disease
dupla,
of their marriage.
já que
So marriage is the association of one person to the other, and
manter-se
of course,
nessa jornada a dois
sometimes if you don't take care of it, it becomes an impossible
não
place
sendo
for one to maintain that journey into.
morre. Com
Of
o
course,
relacionamento
ends up dying.
conjugal,
So of course, it's a marital
ele
relationship,
implica
right?
numa
It
parceria,
implies a partnership,
de ambos.
an investment from both sides of the spectrum.
A
In
contribuição
current
de
times,
Helen, estudando
Bert Helling,
do ponto de
studying
vista
family
da análise
from a point of view of the
coincide
sciences,
tanto
coincides
intensamente
quite a
com a
bit
visão espírita,
with the
quando
spiritist
diz
view
que uma
when he
relação
says or when he
conjugal
argues
ela
that in their relationship
na
really
lógica do
obeys
amor, de
a
dar
law
e receber.
of
Ou seja,
love of giving and receiving.
sempre muito
So the
bem
couple
afinado
is always very attuned,
e crescente.
developing themselves,
Quando ele
growing
consegue
when
estabelecer
they
uma
can
relação
establish the
de
relationship
igualdade no
of
campo do dar
equality
e do receber. O que
when it comes to
significa?
giving and receiving. What does that mean?
Significa dizer que um deve
It
estar
means
ao
that
lado do
one
outro
is always on the side of the other. They have to be on the same time.
mais do que o outro.
Nobody should consider him or herself more
Pena de
or ahead of the
um
other,
movimento
with the penalty of implying
do seu
a
par
disqualifying method
põe a dupla.
that really
Isso vai
establishes that partnership
a relação.
and that
Quem se
depreciates
coloca muito
the relationship.
acima do outro
One that puts
acaba por deixar
ahead of the other
posição de indignidade.
leaves the other in the indignity position,
Pessoa, então,
meaning that the
sai
person
da dinâmica conjugal
will leave that marital dynamics and gets a little distanced from the relationship because he doesn't feel encouraged or empowered to really walk that journey one by the other or going two. So it's really gobbling down the other. It's not, one is oppressing the other. So this relationship, therefore, it's not healthy because it compromises this dynamic of giving and receiving. It's a horizontality component. Of course, we're different spirits with different characteristics. They need one and they one need the other as if being different beings, but no one is more than the other. So this characterizes of this relationship of equality that has to happen in a marriage. This may be one of the most vulnerable points from a marriage overall, to maintain harmony, to keep the harmony of two people. Because a good marriage is a relationship that involves myself and the other, symbologically, in a symbolic form. We're together, we're connected. You and I are intertwined in this common purpose for life. In this relationship, I need to be myself, meaning I have to have my own individuality. You also need to have your individuality kept. So individuality present, of course, in the relationship assures the movement of freedom, of liberty and freedom. And of course, responsibility as well, because it does not mean selfishness. Individuality does not mean selfishness. It really means that each has its own proper identity, and therefore one should not cohabit the other or annihilate the other. So it's the relationship of you and I, or myself and you, in a place where we keep these individualities, but it's also a relationship that involves you and the end component is very important because it shows or highlights that we're together. It signifies or means that we establish this relationship of connection, of unity but not of mixing.
nós não
It's not going to be one component.
de nós
We
mesmos
don't lose our identities. We don't lose ourselves.
continuamos sendo
We continue being ourselves.
espírito diferente do
We're
outro.
different
Nos
spirits
integramos,
that we integrate, we join this
mas não
relationship,
mistura.
but of course we're not mixing.
É
We're not
perda,
we're
portanto,
not
da
losing
individualidade.
our
Vejam
individualities.
que parece um
So
jogo de
see that
palavras, mas não é.
it's a game of words, but it's not.
São
In a
dois
marital
espíritos,
relationship,
são duas metades
they're two
de nós.
spirits. They're not two halves.
Muito dizerem
They unite themselves.
a minha
Some
cama,
people say, "Oh, it's he's my
não é
better
verdade.
half," or "he's my." No, it's not
De
truth.
forma lírica,
It could be from a
dizer que o outro
lyrical term
é
or poetic term,
a
but it's not in reality.
fêmea,
So, for example,
caixa
my
como
twin
uma
soul
metade, como
that
parafuso
really
e parafuso.
connects.
Isso
No,
não é
it's not,
real.
right? A bolt and a nut.
Não criou seres
Like God has
separados.
not created,
Deus
beings by its
não
half.
criou
No,
seres
God has
para
not created beings by their
senão,
pieces.
senão
We're full, we're whole.
de
And
forma
when we relate
inteira,
with others,
sendo inteiro e
when we
respeitando
talk
o
to
outro
others, we
como
respect
somos,
others like
nós
they're also
podemos
full human beings,
nos atrapalhar
that we
no
really
sentido de união,
don't fall the risk of really
usar a
mixing
identidade
that
daquele que
idea of
somos.
losing our identities or really becoming
Esse
somebody else.
processo de
So
interação
this process of
envolve
interaction,
individualidade
it
e
involves
processos de união
individuality
que
in a
caracterizam.
process of union.
Somos dois espíritos
That we are two spirits, we're different.
o outro
One is me, the other one is you,
relacionamos
and then we relate to each other,
sexualmente,
sexually speaking, or with love, in a perspective of interacting very profoundly, that really keep intimacy and really focus psychologically speaking.
intimidades de natureza
So
espiritual.
it's also intimacies from a spiritual matter.
Elas emergem
So they emerge sometimes even before we incarnate.
todos os
A great part of the relationships on earth,
implicam no
they imply a
suas
really resonance in the spiritual world.
através do qual,
They unite in a project
pelo jogo dos destinos,
where of the games of destinies in quotes, and this is very common
esses espíritos
because when these spirits meet each other,
que
they
eles
know
encontraram.
that they've met. They've
Porque dentro de cada
met. There's something inside of
eu já
me that I've known that person before. I'm gonna marry that person.
pessoa
I haven't even talked to her yet or him yet,
tão
but
forte
he has that intuition that's very strong,
pelos espíritos
sometimes even
filhos
stimulated from the spirits who are gonna be the children,
de uma
to really
forma
driving them.
fortuita
So it's in a way that's almost out of luck, but implying
de
a
planejamento
process of planning, spiritual planning, and of course the spiritual interferences that the couple can really meet themselves and start an affectionate relationship,
e depois na construção de uma família.
which would be the construction, the building of a family later. So there is a dynamic, a spiritual dynamic
Vezes nas relações
that
que se
several
estabelecem
times
na
from the relationships that establish on earth,
enquanto
in a way from a planning perspective,
projeto de vida que
from a life project that's mine and yours, that we intertwine, we connect these projects where parts of it, it's in common. When we talk about education of our kids, building of a family, and also with sharing each, driving their own professions, one can really help the other in that perspective. In a marital relationship, it involves a complexity that's very extensive, considering that each spirit needs to keep its own individuality. It's important to say, therefore, that I have to see the other and also be seen from the other. The relationship can not only be sexual, because on a only sexual relationship, it's also with biological intimacy. They can only stay there. And of course, the relationship can be poor. The relationship, of course, marital relationship can also be only physical, with a very intense sexuality that's very gratifying for the pair, but if the relationship only stays there, it's not enough to configure a productive and evolutionary relationship. It has to be a relationship that involves love. And while with love, it's not only with sex, but it's rather of parity. of partnership, of complicity, a relationship of complicity, the grandiosity it's of that relationship, it's really what guarantees its subsistence and persistence when one reveals him or herself to the other. One of the most difficult things of human relationships, it's that we have that degree of maximum degree of priority if we observe. If we don't do that, it drives that relationship to a not a substantial significant part. So if you are committed to the relationship, it's also what involves in its sexuality. It's that idea. I reveal myself to you and you reveal yourself to me in a movement of self revealing, right? Psychologically, biologically speaking. And if it's very profound, the connected relationship, it becomes golden. It becomes in a platform of a very solid platform that's able to sustain the challenges of any kind that life throws at us. So the exercise of that intimacy, loving intimacy, where I don't only remove my clothes, I remove myself, right? I really open myself up to the other. So we get complicity between the growth of each one of us. That's what guarantees the enhancement of loving, right, and care and kind. So if we don't go the other way around, right, what happens when I when I alienate myself from the other, right? Of course, with sexual interaction, but my emotional interaction is not there. So what happens is it's the cooling or the removing, of course, passion that spirits have. It's present when the loving relationship is cultivated. This passion is very intense in the beginning, and then it cools down, stays in a very moderate tone, and the relationship continues, but it's not enough. And the relationship stays more of a by protocol, where a couple is really threatened of external incursions that could, from one way or the other, interfere in the dynamic of the two. And sometimes they are old friends from the past, old spirits from the past, that, of course, in the circuit of relationship, they re edit, they change of adventures that would end up creating conflict in the relationship. Of course, extra marital in a relationship, and of course, leads to separations and all that. So, a way to prevent of solidifying, of creating the solid construction, it's that when I give myself up, when I open myself up in its many dimensions, my many dimensions, profound dimensions of my insecurities, my fears, my questions, my questionings, my inspirations, my aspirations, my wishes, my desires, one for the other. But if I close myself up, but why do I close myself up? Because I'm afraid that the other one is not going to be enough. I'm afraid that the other one see my my shortcomings, my desires, my insecurities. The other one seeing what's inside of me. The one may reject me. That's why I don't open myself up. So instead of being welcomed, instead of being included with all of our, shades and all of our shadows and all of our deficiencies, I don't show up myself entirely to the other. Because if this is going to be able to maintain the relationship, my fears or my fear that's inside of me, that's mine, I don't share, not me not sharing that, it's going to impact the relationship gradually, of the cooling of passion and of the repercussions that this love is going to really drive. In, of course, in a sexuality that's also resigns in that evolutionary dynamics, in the way that really the sharing, the driving the relationship together, where where instead of being open, it gets more closed. So the relationship needs two spirits that relate to each other in a way of preserved identity, with the freedom to be what they are, but with the responsibilities to really internalize that and maintain sexually and emotionally stable. So we see each other, we include each other, we share each other, we invest in each other. I support you, you support me. And this is what's fundamental for two souls that are different from each other. These two different souls, they reveal themselves by their own stories. We each come from a home, a culture, costumes, habits, rituals. Sometimes they're different, but they're only not two spirits. They're two different humanities, if you think about it. So there is a need, therefore, for love to really be able to link these two humanities. Let's look very, high level. If you have to unite Jewish and Palestinian people, they have different traditions and conflicts, and how do we get them together? So to connect two souls, in a generic term, of course, I cited Palestinian and Jewish people because it's a zone of conflict. Could be an Ukrainian and an American, or an English and Italian. It doesn't really matter. It's just the culture, the cultural structure, biological costumes and laws, traditions are very different. The language, right? So it's very different. One is more quiet, the other one is more extrovert and all that. Anyways, we see that difference. So if you connect the two that are very different, it's the way to articulate love. Of course you can. Of course you can. But a good couple is not the one that's the same. Oh, if it was like no, if it's just the same, imagine two dictatorships or two dictators getting together, right? It's not gonna work because the characteristics of that are conflicting. Of course, they are conflicting. So not everything that's the same is good. A good relationship, it's where I comprehend, I understand that I bring similarities and differences from my spouse. So it could be really different, or it could be really aligned, really close, similar, with many things that are the same. What characterizes a good relationship is not a similar or a different relationship, a complementary relationship, but rather what characterizes a good relationship, it's what love does with that. What love does with our similarities and what love does to our differences. Because if there's no love, of course, it happens in relationships. In predominantly speaking, we make our similarities a dispute. Who makes more money? Who has more friends? Who has even spiritists, right? We say that I do more than again. There's this competition in the relationship. Human relationships reveal a very competitive culture in most terms. So this similarity, or again, turns into a dispute, and then we asymmetrical escalate or escalation, right? Where I can be better than you and you can be better than me, and it's the dispute, and then we see we are far away and we lost time. We lose time of trying to be better than the other or more than the other, as opposed to be more connected with the other. So love suggests that we have to support ourselves with our similarities. You and I support each other because we're together. It doesn't matter who's more, who's less. It doesn't matter. With more intensity abilities, no. Nothing like this matters. We're two beings that decided to be together. We have different abilities, and a couple is not made of one winner and one loser. When that happens, the couple loses. It's not a ping pong game or a tennis, right? Where you score a point, I lose a point. No, this is the actual or the current world relationship. What we have to think about it is It's the other types of relationship or games where none of us can let the ball fall. Because if the ball falls, we both lose. If you get a difficult ball, you need somebody to support you. You have to correspond to that need in order to give that ball back so the ball stays up in the air. And of course, we're in good relationship of harmony, of complicity. So we're growing together. So with the similarities, and of course with our differences. We said similarities. Now let's talk about differences. When we have the couple that's very competitive, so one sees the other, try to really impose that one characteristic that's better than the other. So he tries to say, I'm better than you because I'm more rational and you're more emotional, or because I'm practical and you're very romantic, or I'm very romantic. Again, we start to dispute, to compete from different characteristics where I believe my characteristic is better than the other. It's better than being who I am or what I am or how I am versus you, the way you are. So I establish my truth in order to say that my truth is more than yours. Where in a partnership, a healthy partnership, love, in the same way that treats similarities supporting each other, it treats differences in a way that we exchange. My truth is not better than yours. Let me just tell my truth and let me receive your truth. So let's exchange. Let's learn from each other with our own truths. So this exchange, it's highly enriching. Who is more rational learns with who is more sentimental. Who is more sentimental or who's more emotional learns with more. If we're more pragmatic, we learn with more. Again, the way that the other person is. So we learn from each other, and we go different characteristics. They're not bad. By themselves. They're complementary. They're different, and love connects them towards this complementary effect. So when the marriage rather has the dynamics of our similarities and our differences, we call that respect. We call that enriching respect. Our similarities, they support itself, and our differences really bring enriching towards this exchanging. We grow in this exercise of exchanging. I like to cite or to really bring an example of a couple that goes to a shopping mall to buy a piece of clothing. Let's give a generic example. It's always like this, but let's imagine that usually a male or a man, let's talk about a heterosexual couple, that man has more of a masculinity characteristic, of more practicality, objectivity, of reasoning. And let's picture that woman of intuition, of sensibility, of sentiment, and all that. When they go to a shopping mall to exchange a clothes, what does the man do? He sees that store and just traces the shortest open path in that man's head, and he's gonna go. How does the woman go? She's gonna go to inspire herself, look at other stores. She's gonna end at that store. Who is right? Who is wrong? Of course, if they're gonna discuss, nobody's gonna arrive to the truth because you're an insensitive. She may say, you just walk. When you walk, you see you walk more and you see more. You just breathe some air. You get some other experiences. The possibility to look at other windows and maybe another shirt that's different color, different texture. And the guy will say, my my wife, my honey, it's 5 minutes. I'm there. I do this and I go home. So who is right? Reasoning is in the way that I make my relationship, its meaning. So if it's relationship that's investing, he already knows how she is. She already knows how he is. So the man goes, so an hour and a half, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna get a coffee, And I'm going together. I'm going to exchange that in an hour and a half. I'll meet you.
Paulo e Estevão para ler.
I'll get Paul and Stephen the book to read, and then an hour and a half.
Chega feliz,
She gets there happy and
comprinhas,
some purchases, of course,
intuição,
because she was really had the intuition. It was on sale, and of course that's done. Everything is solved. Everything is fixed.
dinâmica do casal,
This is the couple's dynamic
respeito,
that really establishes respect and exchange.
sabe?
So in general terms,
Finanças estão
of course,
baixo, você
that's the
segue
way.
da linha reta e vai com
If
elas.
finances are low,
Vai
right?
para segurar a
Again, we have that, take care of the backpack, and
mão dada, não
when everybody thinks that couples holding hands,
segurando ela para ela não se
right, they think that she's doing really well, but it's not always the case. He may be holding her.
coiçoando
Oh, look at this couple. They only walk, holding hands.
para
No, because usually it's one is holding the other so they don't spend more money. Again, jokes aside, that's the dynamic of a couple that can really evaluate the flexibility.
é um ingrediente que pertence à
Flexibility is a great ingredient that belongs to every human being that's always very positive, that suggests
movimentação resiliente
a movement of resiliency
de poder
that gives conditions
dificuldade
of us to really walk around difficulties,
com as pedras
to deal with stones that are thrown into
ao
us,
longo da nossa caminhada.
that really open up or show up in our journeys.
Eu costumo
They're really able to give a different meaning.
das pedras
So the way to the stones, as we say, could be the stones of the way. So the way of the stones could be the stones of the way if I comprehend that these stones are these movements that I have to make in order to evolve. So they're not stones, rather, but it's a way that really frees our consciences. So that couple is able to make that investment in a way that I can learn from you that romanticism, it's always good as rationality. It's very good to look at an estimate, like use mathematics, not a poetic mathematics, but it doesn't have price, but rather not really looking at the price itself, but of course when we acquire a product or a gift or a service, it has a value that the cold mathematics doesn't really show that. Of course, it's reasoning when I respect my finances, but also when I make an investment from an economical profit, it's not viable, but from an affectionate, from a sentimental profit, it's immense. So I learn how to make that investment in the relationship because I learn with the other is learning with me, and we reflect in this dynamic of, like Jesus said, love, right? When I love myself, I love you. When I love you, I love myself. And then we respect each other as individual beings, each one of us the way we are, and with the possibility of exchanging our knowledges, our wits, our know-hows that are different, and that we also able to support each other, rather, in a way that we're equal, a characteristic that's similar when it comes to the other. Look how this dynamic of marriage, it gets new meanings when we are able to amplify this perception that we are two spirits, two humanities, two stories, two cultures, two habits meeting each other. We are the representation of a genealogical, tree that might be very, very distant from each other, but not because of that, it doesn't make our relationship viable, because we can make that encounter very rich, but it's necessary, fundamentally important, rather, to think about that it's an effective relationship that's progressive. And the prerequisite, it's self-love. Nobody loves the other or others if we don't love ourselves. We cannot be what we are with others if we're not with ourselves. We can't interact with others effectively without interacting with us. So, unfortunately, a lot of loving relationships, they are really centered in our precarities, and we want the other to solve on us. I don't realize that I have to be myself in a relationship too. Of course, Martin Buber's philosophical language, we have this me and you, right? Me dash you, and we sometimes I ask you to replace my father. I ask you to protect me. I ask you to fill me. I ask you to make me happy. But this is historically speaking, parents telling their daughters, "My daughter, I want you to find somebody to make you happy. One day you're gonna find somebody. God willing, you're gonna meet somebody that's gonna make you happy." We're making this very wrong, right? It's a false expectation. It's very limiting because nobody makes anybody happy. Happiness, it's a construction. It's a sharing project. It doesn't happen from outside inside or inwards. That's why the proposition back then with Jesus is love others like yourself, because the exercise of love, it's an exercise of sharing. The other can help me in a movement of autonomy, of self, enlightenment, of self differentiation, of self, knowledge, that I know what's more of me, that I can be more with you. And when I'm with you, I'm bigger, I'm greater. But I'm only that if I am that like that with myself. So the prerequisite for a good marital relationship, so it's a self-care, self-love. So I really fall in love with myself, that should last through eternity, in which enables me, so I enable myself a position to share with somebody else. And to share with somebody else, I give to you, because you can also use that, maybe awakening the best from you, discovering loving and all that. I'm not the one who's going to fill you up in that way, but I'm going to help you towards this inner journey. I'm going to carry you, but I'm not going to replace self-protection. I'm going to have for you a relationship of responsibility, so that our relationship, it's not abusive, it's not violent, but my responsibility with you does not exclude me of my relationship with self-responsibilization or self-responsibility. So it means that each has an investment of self-care, of self-observation, of self-love, in a way that the person gains a new platform, a status that gives the condition so that we can be more mature with each other, and not, children that really need to be taken care of by others, folks with emotional, inexistences, or blanks, or all that. So we don't multiply with stability, because the instability is mine. I can't really get the other one to be the guilty part of it. So I don't, I can't have the other to do what to us, but we are the only ones that can do that. And this is tied to my story. So we don't get a good relationship if we don't actualize our story. We have to update our story. We have to be better with ourselves. And when I'm better with myself, with my, present behaviors, my present being, I give myself to you as a gift. So I can therefore deposit on you the key of marital happiness. I can say in poetic terms, you are you are my twin soul, but not in a generic sense. Of course, in a poetic sense, yes, but not in a practical term, because from the reality, there's no twin souls from anybody. As I said before, God doesn't create people in half. There are people that are established, of course. We have other other types of souls, but we can have that, right? So you are a gem in my life, not a twin, but in other ways, you are a path for me to free myself. And when I free myself with you in this process, we have that states or process. And the Spirit Andrew Lewis stratified some interpretations of that, some of that accidental, encounters that we have no spiritual ascendancy, that have the difficulty in maintaining themselves, all the way up to the last scale of those transcendental relationships that programmed in order to really build great contributions to humanity. There's a connection of profound love that do not only relate to each other to build a family, but they visualize the great humanity's family, like Allan Kardec and Mrs. Abelie Baudet, that gave this great contribution to humanity in a marital marriage that was transcendental. We have very different stratification that characterizes different levels of consciousness, from those are sacrificial relationships. Someone sacrifices and tries to really sustain, right, that person because of vertical evolutionary connection, all the way up to the marriages where people are connected. They're on the same level, and they intertwine themselves very well with their differences and similarities. And of course, those that are more frequent on earth are trials or expiational, right? Marriages of trials and expiations, where they desert themselves. One complains the other one complains the other. So both, they don't have right, they don't have rights again. They're there fighting, discussing, arguing, one accusing the other. Those are the marriages that we meet each other back to really work on pendencies, on what's left behind from previous lives. And we re-encounter, we get together again to really build on the evolutionary journey. This is a majority of marriages on Earth, as we compare a trial, a planet of trials and expiations. Let me remind you of the poet Khalil Gibran, who has a great way when he looked at marriage that really coincides with Spiritism. He says that marriage, effectively, could be compared to two beaches in the exercise of love thyself, love each other, in a waves from one beach to the other, signifying two distinct human beings linked by the ocean of life that intertwines on the exercise of love your neighbor. Love your neighbor and sing, dance, be together, like the chords of a musical instrument that are together, but they're separate in the same melody that is being played. Being together, but not together too much, because the temple columns, they are built separately in order to sustain the temple. And oak and cypress, they don't grow one at the shadow of the other, characterizing that a healthy relationship, people are different. Each has its own space. Each has its own color. Oak and cypress, they express themselves with their own identities, leaves, colors, and they really make that forest with a lot of harmony, talking about God being present in this interaction, being this musical instrument chords, carved oak and cypress, or being these two columns from a temple, or being those two beaches that are welcoming the wavy ocean. Everything meaning the exercise of myself and you other and you in the exercise of loving each other. Let us go to the Q&A session now. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to the panel. We're looking at there's a lot of good comments of the analogy. But Alberto, when you say everything seems so simple, What's the main difference? Is it really simple? Can you? No, it's not simple. It's complex.
Quando a gente
It's
visualiza o que
simple
precisamos fazer,
when we visualize, and we have to do
é
that
como
from
se
my
eu
theoretical point of view.
a dirigir
It's as if I could teach
eu posso
somebody else how to
fazer
drive a car.
funcionamento.
I can
Ele
say
só sabe
how things work.
como é que vai
The
entrar,
person says everything,
como
how
é
to
que
do
vai
this, how to sit down,
como é que vai
put the
programar,
gear, and
onde é
we can.
o
Where's the
freio,
brake, the blinkers, and
luzes. Mas quando a pessoa
but when the
entra
person enters the
no
car,
lado
the
direito,
person can even turn on the car
ou subir na
because
bicicleta, né?
of the bicycle, right? Same thing.
Simples, aí
It's
todo
something
mundo
so simple, but
plaquinhas,
we have four wheels, two at front, two at the back, and
suficiente.
two are only enough.
A teoria,
So
efetivamente,
in theory, effectively, it's a beautiful theory,
a
and you have to
prática
understand
é o
that.
exercício da
Practic,
sabedoria.
practice, however, is the exercise of wisdom.
É o que eu
When
digo,
we gave is the
mas a
theoretical, the
prática
knowledge.
se dá quando
I'm
eu
sorry, the
experimento.
theoretical
Quando
knowledge,
você
but the wisdom
assim, olha, estou
is when I experiment that.
deitado numa rede, depois
So
mergulhar no
when I
Iguaçu,
tell,
além do Pará, é a coisa
it's a
mais
colloquial joke.
linda que Deus
When
criou.
I drink acai berry juice,
Rede à beira de um
staying down
no meio
at
do
a
bosque,
tent in the middle
você
of a
não
forest,
consegue imaginar.
you cannot imagine that.
Traduzir a
Even if I can
palavra,
translate that,
você entrar
the
na
forest,
por
it's
mais
impossible to understand what it is to enter the forest
pequeno rio que
or the small creek that will start to really build other rivers
pequeno porção de água que circula,
of several creeks that really make a river.
diga a temperatura.
Even if I can tell the temperature, what kind of water, the pH, it's impossible to know effectively
O que é
what it is,
mas
what a creek is. But if I take you in one day
estar numa rede,
to lay down,
o açaí, que por mais
drink that acai berry juice,
dizer que o açaí
the more that I can express
não é
that acai berry juice,
porque ele não tem
it's not there's no mixture. It's a pure acai berry juice.
sagrado.
It's a sacred, right? Quote unquote.
Ele é só em Belém do Pará.
But it's only sacred where I'm from
O açúcar
because
e com farinha de tapioca ou farinha d'água.
you can drink that acai berry juice with sugar
Não tem
and tapioca flour.
granola, não
There's no banana, no granola, nothing.
essas coisas.
There's no other
Não tem
things.
nenhuma profanação.
So no profanity, so to speak. Even though I can try to say that,
Que é um açaí sagrado, você não
you're not going to be able to see that. So it's impossible.
visita que você
But one visit that you make,
vai fazer aprendizado
you learn quite a bit.
na floresta.
Like you enter a forest that humid, warm, in the Amazon forest. You lay down in that, beginning of the creek,
Enche o bucho, como a gente costuma
and then you really get your belly full,
mergulho naquele
and then you,
todo
in that hot, humid weather,
gelado.
you dive into that creek that the water is cold. It's great. It's a great experience.
Ela é a experiência da vida.
This experience, it's the living experience, like marriage.
Ele é uma experiência.
Marriage is an experience of learning, but we have to have a map where all the crossroads are, all the differences, all the stones and the rocks, and when I'm there, I know what I'm supposed to do. So it's very pertinent that people ask between knowledge and wisdom, between theory and the learning, real learning, there's the exercise of living. So it's the practice. This is our own conflict. We learn the same thing with us, Christ followers. We learn Jesus, we learned him through Allan Kardec. When we try to live one of the virtues, it's like, oh my God, it's so difficult to be patient. It's so difficult to really forgive. I had no idea it was so difficult. It's so easy when I read, but it's so difficult when I go there. Let's think about Peter, who lived with Jesus for 3 years. So Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive? 7? So I doubt you're going to repeat for 7 times on the phone when somebody's not listening to you. The first, second time, yeah, but the 4th time, you already lost and you're going to hang up the phone. 7 times already, very difficult. And Jesus said, it's not only 7, it's 7 times 70. So even for Peter, that was very difficult for 7. When he said, you know what, I can't, and then he got the sword and just remove the soldiers' ears. I'm not going to suggest that to really lose hopes. No. So marriage is an experience where you build the knowledge, the wisdom. Of course, it's important to have the theory, the reflections about the other experiences, about the natural laws that really dictate, right? This is the first book that I wrote, The Art of Re-Encounter. I don't understand. I don't know if this book is available in English. And we did that, a platform that folks can really see and have available. We'll also do a training. They look at this holistic view, transpersonal holistic view, professional approach that we'll do, offering these training next year to people that are would like to do with the objective to really build knowledge and capabilities and have a better understanding of their matrimonial or their marriages. The resources of this course, or the proceedings rather, of this course will be towards our nonprofit organization. So it's a course for people that are already going to be are trying to get married, those that have been married already, those that are widows and would like to have a better marriage in the future, and those that have already gotten divorced and would like to get married again, and those that are also married and would like to maintain their marriage could also benefit from this training next year. It's a 5-month course. Of course, a lot of live connections, live, and we'll do. I'll give you the idea that it's important for us to learn with the other folks, and of course, better prepare ourselves for our own experiences. Oh, just got a question for us. Let's see if she's on mute still. Let's see if we can get the question going. That's still on mute. Yeah, I think she's on mute.
Nós não estávamos te ouvindo. Agora que
We were
começamos a
not
te ouvir.
listening to the question, so let's go back again. I'm going to repeat. It's another opportunity that we have to help his nonprofit organization participating. I don't understand. I don't believe this is going to be in English, folks. I'm sorry, but this is only going to be available in Portuguese. So, question that I have: until when do I have to maintain a relationship because of the children? Because of the when the relationship is not going well, up to when do I have to maintain that? It's a very delicate question because the only people that are gonna know that is the couple. Because the relationship only maintains itself when the couple makes that investment. And even with the kids, the children, in a way to preserve the family, if the couple does not invest in the relationship, the kids are not going to maintain that marital status. The relationship becomes abusive. The relationship sometimes goes towards violence or goes towards a coolness that the kids will also witness. So sometimes the couple is maintaining the relationship because of the kids, and the relationship worsens so much because they don't invest in each other to really rescue the relationship, only thinking about the kids, to the point that the kids say, you know what? The kids ask for the parents to get together because they see the indifference. They see the communication very sporadic, very compromised. The differences, sometimes words, again, and the kids themselves cannot deal with that. It's very curious when I deal with systemic therapies in families who have the opportunity to follow that. So the couple is doing what they can because the kids are doing the same. so the couple can get divorced.
calamidades
So this is what the man in the spirit calls
que sugere,
calamities.
diz ele no
That's
capítulo
one of the
7,
motivations
tem o livro Vida e Sexo,
of the book Life and Sex,
ele deve
of
manter
the chapter
por ele,
called Divorce.
mesmo
The
que
couple has to maintain the
resultados.
relationship for themselves.
Caio na
Of course, they
ilusão
have to
que o
consider
esforço de
the
amor
kids,
só pelo filho
but an illusion that the strength and the love just for the kids
esse está
is
doente.
not going to maintain the couple.
E se a relação morre,
If the relationship is dead,
energeticamente falsa dentro
it's a false, relationship, false energetically speaking, right?
se manter
And the
no
kids
relacionamento
are learning from their
e
parents
vão
a
repetir
relationship
isso nas suas
front of not really
do ponto de vista
learning a healthy relationship. And guess what? The kids are gonna repeat them sometimes.
crianças,
So there are laws, folks,
estamos os nossos
from a family. When we are children,
como os nossos
we
pais
interject, we internalize
e
the way our
nós
parents
vamos
relate
repetir
to each other, and
conjugais
naturally we're gonna repeat with our marital relationships what we learned from our parents
daquilo que nós
as a as a marriage, as a couple.
casal que vive
So if the couple lives
muito belo, os filhos
in a very good relationship,
conjugalidade
so the kids are doing a training class
enquanto pais
of a healthy marriage, like parents and also like spouses.
vivem
But if the parents live
gaste de
in a relationship of violence, of
agressões
again, of aggression, of emptiness,
e abusos,
of neglect, of abuse,
é uma miséria.
right?
Os filhos
If it's there's a misery in the relationship,
aprendendo
the
como
kids are learning
miserável,
how to live miserably in a relationship with their spouses and so forth, with their own relationships. So
está muito atento
you have to be very attentive
aos filhos.
to take into consideration our kids. Obviously, yes. And they will suffer. But we should not have the illusion
Casamento,
that we're going to maintain
os filhos.
a relationship just because of the kids.
Investimos na relação.
In the relationship, we invest in the relationship considering that we have kids.
Fazer isso.
And we have both,
Ser só um, tem que ser
right?
os dois.
Together. Both have to be on the same page.
Surge calamidades. E mais tarde nós
If not, calamities will arise. And we'll see later on
rosas,
these kids living
trazer
loving relationships with partners,
com seus
bringing forward exactly what they've learned from their parents. The negativity, the neglect, and the abuse, and all that. And then we'll see that it was not worthwhile to maintain. It's much better that we have a separate, the couples separated, but in a healthy relationship. Maybe this is the reason why the spirits told Allan Kardec that the divorce is not against the law of nature. The unruptiveness of the marriage is a law of nature. A lot of contrary, but only human beings can really change their human laws. And Kardec talks about that in question 659, 669, 659, 659, if I'm not mistaken. 667 rather, or 657 rather. And then he later on he talks about that in the Gospel according to Spiritism, talking about the dissolving of marriages in the process of separation when it was taken into consideration the law of love, which is we should not have the guilt, but we should not jump the gun in a way that we leave a relationship in any way, and the first time we just jump off the boat because no, there's a mistake here. And I'm gonna find somebody else that can really correspond to my fantasies that I had since the beginning. That a prince or a princess. You are not a prince. You're not a princess. Why are you looking for a prince or a princess? And then we lose ourselves. In the relationship, of course, the difficulties are normal. They have to be overcome. That's love. But when we are immature, we just jump off the boat. Because there's some minimum situations or circumstances we see people separating themselves. And inconsequently sometimes. So, This is the counter argument that I'd like to make on this question. Any other questions that we may have? We cannot hear.
E agora?
Agora deu.
Desculpa aí. A segunda pergunta, ele
Second question.
como recuperar
How to recover
a integração
the
sexual e
sexual integration and affectionate integration
afetividade
where
casamento?
infidelity enters the marriage.
Ela é
So marital infidelity, it's a very complex topic
muitos fatores
because
confluem
a lot of
para que a
factors
pessoa não respeite a
con-
fidelidade.
drive them together. So folks don't really respect infidelity.
Vivendo a infidelidade
Sometimes
com naturalidade,
people saw their parents with infidelity with a lot of natural, something natural, or an infidelity as a costume, a traditional costume, for example, of men, for example, from a father, a grandfather. Everybody betrayed their wives. It was a costume, and wives had to accept that.
E a gente aprende
Of course, that costume, we learn that, and we bring that sometimes. This tendency, behavioral tendency that's learned, multi-generational, so leads to an infidelity. So infidelity could contribute
transtorno sexual
of a sexual, obsession of somebody that has an exacerbated sexuality,
interação com o parceiro ou com a parceira,
that the partner interaction does not really meet
essa compulsão
that compulsory needs or desire, that may lead that person to look for extramarital relationship because the spouse is not able to really maintain that because the person has a difficulty.
relacionado ao
Sometimes it's related to
amor que foi
a relationship of
o casamento foi esfriando,
disaffection, and the marriage cooled off, and somebody falls in love with somebody else and looks for the relationship outside, involving a parallel affection that really dug the very deep hole that really has to do with infidelity. Sometimes it's just left out, and sometimes it's the person is living that. Because when the couple is vulnerable, in the reciprocal assistance, somebody can show up there outside and really wave towards that. So there are, for example, a spiritual factor when spirits are inclined or put people on the way to really induce extramarital relationships, sometimes establishing influential processes, and the person is inclined to really jump into that without taking into consideration a process of obsession, fascination, subjugation sometimes, and starts that process without being able to really contain him or herself, with a false impression of encountering that person. And sometimes even not knowing that that's not good, he cannot maintain that existence. Of course, it's outside, but has an internal receiving, of course. Otherwise, that person would not look or not search, would not have the same influence, success. And that person really gave up and ended up going to an extramarital relationship. So very quickly, five different points that can really lead to an extramarital relationship. But I'd like to argue or suggest that's a very important question in the gospel, because Jesus picked that same question, that same topic, to that teaching, those who have no sins, throw the first stone. He said that in a moment of somebody's mistake, because we could say that in a homicide or in a moment of difficulty, but he chose where a woman betrayed her husband, right? He chose that moment that woman was being stoned
romana
as the law called for back then.
chamado a se pronunciar e ele o faz.
So he was asked to say, and he made with such an elegance that he says,
Seja o primeiro a tirar a pedra.
"Those without sins throw the first stone," and nobody stayed there.
Nos erros do amor,
So
pode
as we learned in the mistakes of love, nobody can say he's free from them. Oh, Emmanuel says
livre de equívocos
that
amanhã, porque você não
we're
sabe.
going to be free from mistakes tomorrow because we don't know what's going to happen with us today.
Emmanuel sugere
In all of those, Emmanuel suggests
de Jesus
with this Jesus assertive
e o perdão
indulgence and forgiveness. That's very difficult, as we know.
Mas
But
diz, e o
Emmanuel says that,
questão,
and the spirits analyze that question
dizendo quando Jesus
with the different optics.
escreve na terra, depois
As Jesus wrote,
aquele que não
after saying that,
pedra, ele
he wrote on the dirt,
os erros das
he was writing the mistakes of everybody else that were there.
eu logo de início
One of the things that he wrote,
esposo
where is your husband?
adulterou,
Where is the adulteress,
cometendo adultério.
the second man? Because if you're caught being adulterous behavior,
Precisava apedrejar os dois,
the law used to call to stone both, not only the woman.
esposo,
Where is the husband?
todas as vezes
Because
que alguém cai,
every time somebody falls,
mãos ocultas participam da queda.
occult hands participate on that.
Num processo
So when somebody
de
enters
lealdade,
in that collapsing situation of infidelity,
o que está vitimado,
oftentimes the partner
nesse lugar
feels
e a
in that place as well.
de quem
And the culpability
são
that really drove that action becomes full, becomes in totality, because only the true consciences know when somebody slid, when somebody hit a snag and contributed
convivendo com ele.
towards from the one that was living with that person, the neglect, coolness, bad behaviors, abusive, and all those things.
Que esse aqui comparecia.
So in that, one person was really not fulfilling its obligations.
Essa assertiva
So this assertive is not to say
aplauso
or to applaud
simplesmente para
the mistake, but it's only to share responsibility.
particularidade.
If you fall, you're responsible.
Tem
But the victim, in this case, is always also responsible. Nobody falls alone. Nobody falls. Nobody makes a mistake there. Of course, in sexuality, alone.
Alguém se suicida na
When
verdade,
sometimes somebody commits suicide, we have other people that are also responsible for that. More or less responsibilities, but also part of that,
como aquela
co-responsible.
para empurrar
How that society works towards to pushing that person to make that final act.
mas tem uma responsabilidade.
But there's a responsibility. It's a shared responsibility, systemic rather, that we all say. To end,
Quem traiu,
betrayal is who betrayed. If you betrayed yourself first.
traiu,
If you betrayed yourself first in your relationship with the other.
então eu posso
So
trair,
I can feel betrayed,
que o outro
but you understand that that person betrayed. He committed the mistake.
responsabilidade.
He or she has a much bigger responsibility.
Não fico no lugar
So I don't stay in my place of victim,
que a gente acabou de analisar,
considering that we just analyzed,
de que ele
and I understand
é mais vulnerável
that that person is a much more vulnerable situation
para tombar numa
in order to really fall.
alguma parte nisso.
Of course, I may have a part on that,
Eu recolho
and then I collect my part, and it's with me,
isso de
of an exercise
e de
of self-respect
para o outro.
and also indulgence and forgiveness. Of course, it may take a while, as we know.
Uma experiência que eu posso
I lived
de amigo,
a experience with a friend,
de uma separação,
a very similar experience with a lot of losses, separations, and family and financials, and
estava numa reunião mediúnica,
he was in a mediumistic reunion, a meeting,
trouxe uma entidade
and the spirit brought an entity, like a spiritual, entity that was needed, and started to talk to this friend. And when
sabia de nada,
nobody knew about anything,
nada que ele tinha experimentado.
of course, we had no idea about it.
Pois é,
And the spirit said, "Well, you are my friend, and you betrayed me.
ficou com meus
You took my wife, you took my kids,
você falsificou a minha
you
assinatura.
falsified my
Disse
signature.
esse amigo.
And he said to our friend,
Mais tarde,
but
você
later on,
disse que tinha falsificado a
you
minha
told me you falsified my signature.
casa.
You weren't really care
Então,
for what happened.
esse amigo que vivia essa
So this
experiência
friend of ours who lived this experience, he said,
vivendo uma
I was
situação
living a
que
situation
tinha perpetrado no
that
passado.
I had perpetuated in the past,
Agora, em grau mínimo,
and I was living
porque o que
here
eu fiz para o outro
because what I did in the past to the others
pior,
was immensely worst.
que era um amigo.
Made me vulnerable, made me myself vulnerable, my friend vulnerable. And Spirit will tell me,
Meu amigo,
well, you were my friend. I loved you,
você me traiu.
and you betrayed me.
Então eu estou
You
dizendo
betrayed yourself.
que às vezes
Why am I saying this?
uma relação que
Because
está agora, uma
it could
perda,
be a betrayal that establishes now, so it's contained also
contas da minha
in a conscientious adjustment that I feel myself sometimes victim.
ter mais amor
We need to really have more love towards the indulgence, towards forgiveness, towards the possibility of coming together. And sometimes a betrayal, the couple cannot really reinstitute the loss of trust given the motivation. Sometimes it's possible. Sometimes there was a betrayal that was involved by alcohol, or it was an accident. And of course, that couple with a patrimony, with a loving and care, of course, they have their own difficulties and differences. You can't really overcome that. There's no mistake in trying to invest and look for a relationship that we can come back. But only that person, that couple, no, or would know. Of course, when that person knows or gets to know if it's a betrayal that's frequent, right? That again, that might be a little difficult to, in a way, to forgive or to really bring that back trust to the relationship. And of course, that person also has the right to choose that. See how complex that is. Each situation involves different ways of respect for the couple. Only the couple is able to know if they can forgive themselves, if there's a chance for that forgiveness to overcome the betrayal and to arrive a much stronger. I know a lot of couples that have had that happen to them, and they continue, and they come out of this stronger. And the relationship serves as a way to really come back. Of course, when you have for example, when you break an arm, right, and you fix that, right, where the fracture happened, the bone becomes stronger. Of course, we should not stimulate divorces. We should not stimulate, no, we should not do that, right? Because we don't know what's happening in that environment. Sometimes, the exacerbation or the advancement, we just go beyond the other. You have to analyze, but only you that really, you wear that shoes, to know about your resistance, all your indulgence of that situation to come right back and really rescue the relationship. One thing is for sure. Forgiveness, either you coming back to the marriage or you getting divorced, forgiveness is the important. It's always positive. Independently if you're going to keep married or go towards a divorce, forgiveness is the process of health, psychologically, spiritually, biologically health. So you can really leave that relationship feeling full, and of course keep going or continue going with your life free from those resentments. So you have to self-forgiveness, and of course forgive the other as well. And if we lose that opportunity, it becomes very difficult to do that. It comes to unbalanced situation. Every one of us could fall. The problem is not to fall, but not to stand up after we fell. Thank you, Dr. Almeida. We still trying to validate. There's time for one more question. The question is: the couple that has been tried for many, many times, many years to have kids, how could they fulfill that void in their life, in their marriage without kids?
que vive um
So the
relacionamento
couple that
que
lives
tenta
a
desdobrar
relationship that tries to really
através dos filhos,
continue progressing
consegue operar
towards the
uma manifestação da
kids,
reencarnação,
it does not is not able to really
buscar
enable that.
canalizar esse
They
amor
can
de pai
canalize the channel of that love
que está represado
that's
pelo
sometimes repressed,
acolhimento, pela adoção
being on the way of adopting a
muitas
child.
crianças
There are many, many
procurando
children
lares
waiting for
que
homes
possam lhes tirar
that
da
may
orfandade,
really take them away from orphanage,
dos
of also
lugares
vulnerability,
onde elas ficam como
of places
órfãs,
they are less orphans,
tendo pais substitutos
having
disponíveis
substitute
e
parents
esse
available for them.
escolha tem que ser dos
They
dois, não
can
pode ser de
choose
um.
that. Of course, the choice has to be from both.
Tutelar uma criança
They can
vulnerável
tutor
aonde ela
a
está,
child that's vulnerable,
uma
whatever
família
she or he is,
vulnerável,
or a vulnerable family,
crianças que eles
children
apadrinham e
that
ficam
they
como
can really
padrinhos. O padrinho é o pai ou a
maintain
mãe
the substitute
que vai
parents, right?
trazê-lo,
They
tem
can really support, they can patronize,
estabilidade,
right?
convivência,
Those children,
colocando
living with them,
energia
becoming
em
the
colocar
substitute
a
parents.
energia de
They
amor
can channel that energy of love
aonde
towards a cause
propõe-se
where they can
a
propose
serem pais
of being parents
de uma causa
of a cause,
no campo do bem,
and of course, the way of goodwill, social help.
portanto,
And they can patronize
tipo de trabalho de uma
a type of
ONG
work of a nonprofit, right?
e eles fertilizam
They
suas
can
vidas
godfather, right, that situation.
de outras formas.
And they can
Já
really
teve
have
casamento
kids
que não teve
from
filhos,
other ways.
não se conjugou, mas
For
teve
example, Divaldo did
400,
not have any kids, but
mais de
he's
400 filhos livres,
had more than 600 children.
amor, que
He spent all his energy of sexuality and all that
produção
in the production
de obras através da
of
mediunidade.
works with mediumship and all that.
Várias vezes
When couples
revelam instituições,
have, they lead institutions and
citamos
nonprofit organizations.
que não tiveram
Allan
filhos,
Kardec and Emily Budel, we saw them as well.
grande
They did not have any
patrimônio da
children.
humanidade,
They left a great
edifício de amor,
patrimony, a great,
aonde eles
well
gestaram
being and great works for humanity.
na codificação do
So
espiritismo
in the
mensagens
human way, they had really left towards
capitaneadas
towards
pela
spiritism.
verdade e legaram para a humanidade.
They left that legacy towards humanity. What we cannot do, however,
Energia de pai e
is to
mãe
have that energy
suprimida.
that's hidden, that's
Não
suppressed,
é justo
because it's not fair
e tanta
to
energia
have all this love, all this energy
distribuída
that could be distributed to others.
não transforma
And like me, I keep that, I don't maintain, I don't create
e
a will, or don't create something that
aonde
can really drive benefits to society where we are inserted. Thank you, Dr. Amida. It's 12:30, and we're about to close our activities.
Tem mais alguma? Não, nós temos mais alguns 5 minutinhos.
Bom, se deixar, não para as perguntas, mas acho que a gente pode encerrar por agora e, de repente, falar sobre o Jardim das Oliveiras,
Let's
como é que as pessoas
talk
podem...
about the non-profit work, non-profit institution that
Ok.
Dr. Amida chairs in Brazil.
Doutor Alberto, nós ficaremos aqui.
Dr. Amida, we could be here all day long talking to you about this topic that's so important to all of us.
Com certeza,
With,
nós temos muito que te agradecer.
we have a lot to thank you
Te dou vários
because you've awakened a lot of topics that are very helpful
qual o outro, quase que a
in a
totalidade.
way that we all fall through, right? We all we're all part of it.
Foi muito, muito
So
proveitoso para todos nós.
it was very helpful for a lot of us,
Nos foi
and
alertado a respeito de como nós
how
podemos
again we've been told, you told us how can we can really distribute
o nosso
all that love
né, através
through
muitas vezes das
oftentimes difficulties that we find in our relationships.
e o nosso
So
com certeza
we
o nosso propósito
our purpose here for sure
poder
is once again to be partners,
juntos nesse trabalho de
to
amor,
work together in this labor of
como
love
você nos disse,
that you've shared with us.
esse projeto
This project
iremos
that
né, que vocês irão prover,
it will be able
com
to provide.
certeza ficaremos
So
atentos
we'll be
para
attentive
assim elucidarmos ainda mais
to get that knowledge
esse nosso
to
ponto,
our point.
que muitas vezes ainda é prático,
So oftentimes it's very difficult, it's very
né,
tragic,
mas será
right,
muito
in our
proveitoso para
lives.
todos nós.
But it'll be very
E
helpful.
nós ficamos mais uma
And of
vez
course, we're here once again,
lembrando,
reminding
convidando
ourselves,
para que
inviting all of
visitem
us
o site do
so
Jardim
that we can visit the site
e ali vejam a beleza
and you
do
see
amor,
the beauty of love,
das flores que florescem
of the
naquele
flowers that we
né,
see that
trabalho que é feito
from this work
por tantos voluntários,
from done from a lot of folks
da família Almeida.
from the Amida
E
family.
aqui ficou o nosso convite. Vamos
And
participar.
this is our invitation to participate,
Pede a solidariedade,
that we call for solidarity,
a fraternidade.
that we call for fraternity.
Vamos fazer parte
Let's be part of that great work.
deu aqui a dica. Né?
Given again, this is
Filhos ou não temos nossos
the
filhos
hint or the suggestion. Even though sometimes we don't have
uma dessas crianças.
a kid from ourselves, we can become godparents
E
of
também
these children.
vamos ajudar.
Not only that, but we'll,
Podemos alimentar a alma, mas não podemos
we need to feed our soul
também.
with the option, right?
Como tudo e como nós
Like everything that we see,
do apoio
we need the support from material support as well. So we leave the invitation.
pode ser a hora que
You can make a donation, of course. This is all optional. Our Spirit Center is gonna be able to donate. You can donate to the site directly. I don't believe, folks, this is available in English. This website is only available in Portuguese.
e é uma oportunidade
But
de exercitar
it's an opportunity for us to practice love and charity that we all have,
e só vamos
sharing some of our,
nós
some proceedings with the institution.
todos somos irmãos e que todos
We're all siblings. We're all, children of God,
é verdade.
and this is a great example of a serious,
Imensamente.
righteous institution that really helps
Esperamos que logo
children in need.
passe toda essa
Dr. Amida, we hope that
possa ter
this whole COVID situation passes very soon,
na nossa
so we get a chance to meet with you
jantar,
here,
tínhamos
and we will do our a fundraising dinner that we had planned for,
também para com
also to really help
com você, de todos
this trust and this love that you give to
nós temos
people,
muito
the
para
great person that you are.
agradecer,
We have so much to thank you,
maravilhosa,
all the family, all your family,
Jesus, nosso mestre,
to thank our Jesus, our professor, that allowed us for this re-encounter
e nessa
of this fight
disseminação do
towards really
Evangelho.
broadcasting love,
Te ilumine
right?
todo esse
May Jesus continue to shine light on your life,
vez mais
on your days,
alimentando essas almas.
and really feed those souls
Deus te abençoe.
that you do. God bless you.
Muito obrigado.
Our
Gostaria
many thanks.
de agradecer
I'd like to thank
o carinho
Jesse of the care and love
se
that you have
no acolhimento das causas
wrapped yourself in the
que
welcoming
multiplicam no bem,
of these causes that really multiply in goodwill
na assistência.
towards the assistance.
Eu queria agradecer.
I'd like to thank,
Queria convidar os
I'd like to
internautas
also invite
fazendo
those folks that are
iniciando
following us from the internet.
dezembro ou janeiro,
We're in December or January,
uma de cuidando
the
da criança
third
interior. Aliás, foi um seminário.
class of taking care of the inner children.
Já fizemos duas
We've done that. We've done 2 classes.
e a Lena
Myself, my wife,
estamos nós três
and
mais duas
Lema Lopes, so 3 psychologists. We have this online training class,
pelo
5 months
pela internet
through internet,
de trabalhar
and
sua criança,
those who'd like to work your inner children,
a sua
inner child,
educaduras,
on your own story and all that,
estão interferindo no adulto e
that
tiver
might be interfering in the adult.
no meu Instagram,
You can go to my Instagram.
Almeida underline Belém e
I
nesse
don't believe, folks, this is available in English.
Alberto underline
Alberto _ Belém.
íconezinho
There's an icon.
aí você vai
You
lá
say
e
course,
cadastra, não é
and
se inscrever, só se cadastra
you can just
porque você receberá
you're going to receive instructions and informations about the class. And you take a look if you want to do it, if you don't want to do it. And it's going to work in December. It's going to start in December. So it's a great resource. It's all the proceedings will go to the Garden of Oliveiras. Of course, the marital course, it's also, we're going to be announcing in our social media, through Instagram, through Facebook, when it's going to go, it's going to be launched towards, relationships. We're going to take a look at that. So my gratitude, our friends from Boston, thank you so much. I'd like to ask our good spirits, our Professor Jesus, to play with us. Bless all the families from Boston, all the families from Pará, all the families from all the folks who are following us from the internet, with this love that we've learned here today. This invitation that Jesus made us so that we should love each other like he loved us, like he loves us. May we continue with our efforts towards the goodwill, towards our inner transformation. We may see our spouses, our children, with this look, this eyesight of Jesus towards goodwill, how Jesus looked us, to see and really find all the good that's inside all of us. May we give all of our best gifts, our best behaviors, our best intentions. We'd like to thank our Jesus, our good spirits for this event, for our lives, for our children. In the moment of so much difficulties and tribulations, may we find other meetings like this so we can really reflect on the teachings in our lives. May we continue our day, our week, with your love. So be it. Thank you all. We're going to close our activities for today. So people in the... Thank you so much, folks.